welcome to the second episode of the ZEROFX. I think we're still working out what the hell we're called. As usual, you will hear my child in the background on a regular basis, so apologies for that one. With us today, we have the lovely John Jackson, aka John J. Hacking. Thank you very much for joining us, John. Would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. So I am a senior penetration tester for TrustWave, Spider Labs specifically, which is their security consulting pen test kind of department or division, you can say. And I am the founder of Sakura Samurai, hacking group, and we basically do legal hacking.
I hope you said legal hacking there, not illegal.
Legal, not illegal.
I was like, wow, doxed himself already. Yeah, so I think really that's kind of how I know you from Twitter and seeing the stuff that you've been doing around Sakura Samurai. So I think that's probably what we're going to focus the conversation on today. So do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of how you started it? What was the reason behind you kind of creating a group and kind of who you've asked to be involved in it?
Sure. So, there's a lot of reasons that I created Sakura Samurai. One of the biggest reasons being that most of the hacking groups that are out there and are known, with limited exceptions, they kind of base themselves around hacktivism and illegal hacking. Obviously, we wanted to stay within the confines of the law so we don't end up in jail just trying to hack. But hacktivism is needed in its own sense, but that wasn't us. So I drew a lot of inspiration from Cult of the Dead Cow and Anonymous and kind of how they operated, and figured that I could probably make my own hacking group. I wanted to be in Cult of the Dead Cow at one point in time, but they've got their own vetting process and the way they do things. And jokingly, I went on Twitter and I was like, I'm gonna start a hacking cult. Actually, even before that, I was like, I want to join a hacking cult. So if you want me to be part of that, then message me or whatever. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna start one, and I did. And I asked a few people to be involved that I was doing security research with, like Jackson Henry, Aubrey Cottle, aka Kurt Tanner, and Robert Willis, aka Regex, and those were my original kind of members. And this was co-founded between myself and someone named Nick Soller, aka Arctic, and he's retired now, but he was my co-founder, and we worked on some of the early hacks together, United Nations and that kind of thing.
Excellent. That's so yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's cool. I think I saw your TikTok on Twitter, which is confusing, the other day, where you were saying that loads of people keep kind of asking you whether you can join your group and kind of how they can get involved with it. And you were saying to them, like, guys, just start your own group. It's not like an us versus them kind of thing. It's, you can all do it.
That's part of the thing that makes it really difficult is people think that it's like some sort of attainable goal that they can shoot towards. And maybe it is. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it like everything kind of just flows naturally. You meet people, you research with them, you get to know them and you like them. And then you kind of vet them, see who they are, and bring them into the group if you want them. It's not like something where you sit down and do a job application type thing. It's not anonymous where you just start wearing a mask or start hacking under the name and doing it. It's neither of those things. It's very Cult of the Dead Cow like in how we vet our members. We keep our processes kind of segmented and separated from what the world knows, because if people know how we vet people, then they're going to game it. And we don't want that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in terms of Sakura Samurai, what are I don't know if we can ask you like what you're working on, or if there's I don't know how it works. Like what can we ask you about it?
Sure. It's very natural. And what I mean by that is sometimes the hacks come to us, and it's weird to say that, but it's like you'll stumble across something, especially when you've been hacking for a while, and you're like, oh, something seems wrong about this, right? And then you drop it into the group chat like, hey, take a look at what this application's doing, or take a look at what I found on this server while I was like logging into my bank, or what, you know, whatever the case may be. And then we look at it and we make a determination based on like the impact and if it's exploitable and that kind of thing. And if it is, then we kind of make the next move. So imagine, like, I'll give you an example. Ford, for instance. Ford was kind of dropped into our lap, you know. Robert Willis, Regex, and one of his friends, Breaker, who he's not in the group, but he's a friend. They started playing around with a chat application through Pegasus, and that's how they were able to exploit that, which after we did a little bit of research, we found that it was also on Ford. And then we found that Ford had a vulnerability disclosure program. So we were like, okay, well, what if we play around with this vulnerability on Ford? I wonder if we could do anything. And then we ended up getting admin access to their internal application and being able to pull tokens and being able to pull user PII and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, sometimes we sit down and we go, hey, here's a list of VDPs, like vulnerability disclosure programs, that we can legally hack on, like, just have at it. And sometimes, you know, we end up doing like bug bounty research and finding a CVE that affects everything. Or sometimes it's private research where we just get paid and we just go on our way. You know, we don't necessarily make news for it or something like that. So it's like all sorts of different types of hacking.
Do you ever find like vulnerabilities in an organization and then you tell them about it and they don't want to disclose it? Like, is that a common issue? Or
is it a common issue? Yes, absolutely. I've found about 9 out of 10 times that I'm trying to do a disclosure, they don't want to disclose it to the public. I would say more often than not, we convince them that it's going to happen anyway, and they just kind of go with it, you know, because based on like it all depends on if it's like a bug bounty program or a vulnerability disclosure program, or if it's open source software. So like, for instance, take something like Signal. Signal is an open source product. So, you know, to be fair, quote unquote fair, right? You want to give them 90 days to resolve an issue before you disclose it. You want to try to give them that period of time. However, there's really no law against if you were to just drop on open source software unpatched. You can kind of do it because it's open source. However, you know, we try to work with people in the right sense. Then you have vulnerability disclosure programs. They're a little more stringent. You kind of want to make sure they fix the issue before you drop it, because, you know, some of them are big name companies or government entities and stuff like that. And you don't want them to get exploited because you just couldn't be patient. So we try to be fair about that, but it doesn't always end up fair. Like Ford, for instance, they were like just straight up ignoring us. And we were like, okay, they're running a vulnerability disclosure program, but they're running it through HackerOne. HackerOne states that their policy is you got to wait 180 days to disclose if they're not working with you. And I'm like, oh God. So we had to wait that full length of time to disclose something that was already fixed, just because they were like, no, we don't care. And, you know, that ended up burning them in the news a little bit. And that's not really our fault. That's the nature of the game.
You say that's the nature of the game. I'm curious because I've never, well, I'm fairly new into the industry, so my knowledge and understanding of hacking is completely skewed by media reports rather than actual any real knowledge. So
Sure.
When you say it's a game, do you consider it a game, or do you consider it more of a service?
So I look at it kind of in the sense of it starts as a service, but sometimes ends up a game. And if that makes sense, it's like, okay, here's something that I did for you for free, and you don't really care that I'm trying to help you, or maybe you're coming after me, or maybe you're being passive aggressive about it. Okay, well, it just turned into a game now. Now it just went from simple media disclosure or something as simple as, wow, you know, these security researchers helped us out and it was really great. And then shake of the hand, as Sick Codes would call it, one of our previous members, into a just full out, oh, look at this company that doesn't care about security research and basically free vulnerability reporting to help them fix serious issues, right? So that's when it kind of turns into a game. And it's not really us turning it into a game so much so as it just looks bad because you pass on the disclosure to the media and they go, okay, well, why weren't they responding to you? Well, they didn't feel like it. They didn't want to, you know, maybe they have stocks and they don't want their stock price to be affected. But it's kind of that Streisand effect a little bit where, well, if you avoid it long enough, it's going to hit 10 times harder. And that's what happened with Ford.
I was going to say, like, surely if they're not doing anything about it when they know about it and it's not kind of like public knowledge, when someone actually exploits it from a malicious perspective, it's clearly going to be so much worse than them just having to fix it in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think when people work with you, it has less media impact and less negative impact for the organization. A perfect example is Keybase. I found a vulnerability where they were storing photos in clear text and they're supposed to be encrypting them or not storing them at all, one of the two. And they weren't doing that. And basically what happened with that is I reported it through their bug bounty program on HackerOne. They were great about it. They paid me for it. We got it resolved. We got the CVE issued. And it did make the news, but it only hit maybe a couple news outlets. And if you actually look at the media, it paints Keybase in a very good light. Like, oh, they, you know, took care of the issue very quickly and they got it resolved and got the vulnerability patch. And that's ideal. That's what you want. That's good media. It makes you look better as a company. Hey, these guys found this, but the company responded and fixed it very quickly and were very helpful. That's what you want ideally.
The reality is that it's unlikely that almost every system is 100% secure. There's going to be ways into the majority of systems available. So if people can find them and help you, take advantage of it. There's no point being a dick about it and just say, no, you're wrong, I'm not listening to you, la, 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 we're fine. Because, yeah, obviously it's going to bite you.
It's basically like free pen testing. So
kind of.
But like, yeah, I know it's not like you're not sitting there going, here's like where we could use, like, you're not looking like at the whole environment, but you found a way into that system that it should hopefully would get picked up by a pen test. But if it's an uncommon vulnerability, then I guess that's kind of where you guys step in and you're finding the things that are kind of new or whatever, right?
Sometimes. I mean, if you look at the Indian government, for instance, I think they hit the top 10 for cybersecurity in the world right now. But when we were working with them, they were very low ranking for their cybersecurity. And that's because they were not taking their vulnerability management and reporting seriously at all. And we kind of forced their hand a little bit. And I hate to put it that way, but we had, I don't know, I think 32 odd pages of vulnerabilities to report to them that we found within, I don't know, 48 hours. And it was absurd, the amount of things we can do, the amount of servers we can take over. I got remote code execution on their financial server. Aubrey Cottle, aka Kurt Tanner, he chained that together with a session takeover and was actually able to access their financial application. So we had access on both the client side, the user side, and the server side. So like we controlled that financial application 100%. And that was just one of many, many things that we had found, like credentials to, you know, power grid type things. And like, it was bad. So yeah, it was a service. Like we went through the Pentagon to get help disclosing to them because we were like, shit, they're gonna haul us off in a fucking, like, they're gonna, I don't know, just bust our door down and just black bag us and just put us on a plane to India, like straight up. It was that bad, like the amount of stuff that we found. I mean, and then you have Jackson Henry. He's one of our youngest members, Conchi, 15 years old. And he's tearing India apart. He's tearing them apart. He's finding PII for students and shit, like leaked on database backups, and he's just dumping it. And you're just like, holy shit, this is like, wow, this is bad. So you would think that they're doing pen tests, right? But you'll find that like government is super bad with that. And some of the enterprises are bad too, because pen testing to them is doing a vulnerability scan or hiring pen testers, but not fixing any of the issues.
Yeah,
just,
I think
check the box.
That's the thing. I think a lot of companies do pen testing as kind of a tick box exercise. Like we've had a few people come to us, not necessarily customers of ours, but people even just people who've inquired with our organization saying like, oh, our insurance company have said that we've got to get a pen test. So can we just do like whatever the minimum amount of pen testing is that gets me insured by this company? And you're like, why? Like, surely you want to do like the adequate amount of pen testing that makes you secure, because then you'll know where all the holes are. There's no point in me just scanning your external IPs. Like that's because that's basically all the insurance companies are asking for. Literally like a vulnerability scan on your external infrastructure. Like,
and that's the other thing too, right? Like you bring up a really good point. Looking for holes though and patching are two separate things. You know, you'll have companies that buy the most advanced red team and pen test exercises, identify all the vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and do nothing to fix them. Come next quarter or semi-annually, whatever their specific requirement is for their industry, they'll go in and pen testers will run the same exact playbook and find the same vulnerabilities because they haven't fixed it from 6 months prior. And that's one of the issues. It's what's the point in paying for that, for the checkbox exercise, if you're not going to fix it, because you're wasting your money essentially. And then, you know, you get hit, someone drops ransomware, you know, GDPR violations and yada yada. It goes on and on until you rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And you're like, you could have just assigned a few employees to patch these vulnerabilities, whether it be network side or on web application, mobile, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I think that's that's true. You mentioned about like companies having internal pen testers as well. Do you think it's important that companies go to like a third party to get pen tested? Because I mean, I do, but then I sell pen testing, so I'm probably biased on that one. I'm like, yes, please come to us and we'll check it. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah. So a lot of enterprise companies have internal pen test teams who are like looking at their own environment. But for me, I think that's kind of like marking your own homework, because surely you know where all the holes are, and you probably get like a little bit not complacent, I guess, but I think maybe you just get used to looking at that environment. It's like when you write in a document and you read the document over and over again, you miss where the spelling mistakes are until you give it to someone else to look at, right? So is it the same thing with pen testing?
I think there's a few aspects to it. That's one of them. Complacency is definitely a thing where you might see something from a different light. I also think there's a physical requirement too. So what I mean by that is, depending on the organization, especially like financial organizations, they can't always use internal pen testers to assess their environment. They have to actually like outsource and hire third-party companies. And they do that from PCI DSS kind of compliance standpoint because they want to ensure that there isn't collusion, right? That they're not just checking the box. And that happens too. And that's kind of part of what sucks with that is I might see a vulnerability in the environment that I look at and go, oh, that's not that big of a deal. You know, I've been looking at this and it hasn't been fixed, but it hasn't been exploited. And then you might come in from an external perspective and start hitting it and being like, whoa, I just found this vulnerability and here's what I can do with that vulnerability. And it might be completely different. You know, to me, it might be something as simple as like, I don't know, let's say reflected cross-site scripting vulnerability. And I might just be like, oh, wow, that's no big deal. And they're not really fixing it, whatever. But a third-party company or even a threat actor might take that reflected cross-site scripting and use a beef webhook with it or something and are able to take over other parts of the application because they're stealing cookies. And then you have a big problem on your hands because you just weren't ready for it. And I think a lot of pen testers know that risk lies there, but the business doesn't necessarily care. And that's where it gets complicated.
I think that's an issue a lot of the times. Like the CISO probably cares about all these issues and wants to make it more secure, but trying to convey that message to like the rest of the board when they're thinking like, how do we improve our profits or how do we get more customers on board, whatever. They're not really looking at like whether there's a vulnerability in some web application that people log into, right?
Yeah, I kind of have the unique perspective of understanding that well, because I wasn't always a pen tester. I was a senior application security engineer before this, and I did pen testing and would also do intake for vulnerabilities through our HackerOne program. And when I would pass this over to teams to fix, there was a few different scenarios. One of them was they would try to just ignore it, be like, oh, this isn't that big of an issue, and then I'd have to escalate. Or two, they knew it was an issue, but resources to get it fixed in a timely manner was difficult. Or three, they realized the value of security and they fixed it straight away. So it could be one of the three, but I'd say primarily, more often than not, it's they realize that it's an issue, but resources aren't there to get it done in the time frame that we want, and that is the reality of it. And that's because of the enterprise not putting money into secure coding. Like you said, the CISO knows that it's an issue, but it just doesn't get taken care of in that sense, because it's like, okay, what value or what monetary value are we receiving from security? Well, you're not losing a shit ton of money. That's the biggest key that you're overlooking. You're not just getting ran for millions of dollars.
Yeah, I always try and at my last job, we used to have to go and kind of explain to customers what the ROI would be of like implementing some of the Microsoft security stuff. And a lot of the time I was like, but it's kind of an intangible benefit. Like you're technically saving millions because you're not going to have like all of these issues going on, because you've actually got something in place that like, say like something like Azure Information Protection, Defender for Identities, where it's kind of looking at your on-premise environment, and it's looking at whether if you're getting pen tested, it should light up like a Christmas tree. So if someone was hacking your environment, you would be able to see that they were kind of like escalating their own privileges and that kind of thing. So like knowing that, there's not like a financial benefit you can really attach to it, but it's kind of invaluable, because if there's someone in your environment doing that kind of thing, then they're not there for a great reason either. They're probably there because they're trying to do something malicious.
Right. Yeah. So the enterprise space for pen testing is kind of cancer in its own sense. Hate to put it that way, but that's the truth there. And then when you want to move away from that and start talking about bug bounties and VDPs a little more, it has its own set of issues. I wrote a book called Corporate Cybersecurity: Identifying Risks in the Bug Bounty Program. It's being published through Wiley, I think in the December-ish timeframe. And I can tell you that one of the biggest problems with bug bounty programs, well, there's a lot of problems, but as a researcher or as a hacker, scope is always a problem, and understanding of impact, right? You're communicating with these programs and you're trying to say, hey, look what I can do with this vulnerability. And they're going, okay, well, I know that we have this rated as this, but this is a dev environment, or this is that environment, right? Like this is a, sandboxed environment or whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter if you can take over the server. And you'll see that. And it's like, well, remote code executions are critical. That's what you should pay me for, because that's the nature of the vulnerability. And the impact is it's not minimal, because just having a server or being able to take over a server that the company owns, you could do a lot with that. You can start launching spear phishing campaigns, setting up web apps under their name, doing all sorts of stuff beyond what they're seeing, right? So it doesn't matter if it's just one server and not connected to the entire environment. There's a lot of impact. And I think that bug bounty program managers, they don't understand that well at all. And VDP managers and don't understand like security researchers in general, especially like when you're talking about CVEs or the CVE space.
Do you ever get to do like red teaming as well as kind of general pen testing as well?
So I'm kind of new to that. I just started a job as a senior pen tester for TrustWave. But, red teaming is definitely going to be part of the job, because we have to do engagements where we have to fish and all that kind of stuff. And phishing, as everyone knows, is a very good method to attack, because people are the weakest link. And that's just the reality of it. Not everyone is technically educated nor cares to be.
That is controversial. People are the weakest link.
Is it?
I don't think that's controversial.
Well, I think it kind of, we always say that like you defend it, like you have the human firewall, right? So people are either going to be the strongest link or the weakest link. So if you've gone on you erred on the side of like weakest link, but maybe if we all, I don't know, I think like the security team needs to take some responsibility for like explaining security to people. Not necessarily the security team, but like the organization needs to have an emphasis on security, so they're explaining to their employees like why they should be taking security seriously.
Love it. Here's the news. Our first story this evening is the saga of the fake Banksy NFT sold to a British collector via the artist's official website. The victim, a prominent collector known to us only as Pranksy, you literally couldn't write this shit, paid over $300,000 for the digital token, which has now been repaid back to him. Pranksy, if you're watching, our ZEROFX NFT is available next week at the bargain price of $50,000. We'll await your call. Next up is the story about Twitter introducing a new safety mode to stop so-called pylons, where an account is thought to be repeatedly sending, harassing, or insulting tweets to an individual, or repeated uninvited mentions. The account will be temporarily blocked and unable to send their target any DMs, tweets, or even review their profile. Looks like Piers Morgan is in for a quiet few weeks when this launches. And finally, the news that China is attacking the BBC in an attempt to undermine its credibility as a news outlet. Recorded Future researchers have identified hundreds of websites and social media accounts which have been attacking the BBC's reporting, particularly with reference to a supposed gloom filter, which makes the country look dull and lifeless. Critics have been left questioning whether the BBC has been applying the same filter to pictures of Tory ministers, but it turns out no, they actually do have the personality of a potato. Over to the weather. You stay classy, InfoSec community.
Starting in the southwest, the run of unusually warm weather we've had is resulting in a growing area of high pressure around Exeter. Nothing to do with the weather, that's just on the roads. Historically, of course, this is mining country, so keep an eye out for adventurous types wearing head torches. Moving on up into the Midlands, we see thick cloud cover, no precipitation to speak of, just badly named products and poorly designed user interfaces. The picture changes as we move further east. Keep an eye out for sin flooding, especially in low-lying areas. More or less the same picture moving north, though obviously wetter, colder, and different accents. Don't expect too much change as we move into the weekend. Expect patches of sunshine and broken cloud with the occasional shower. Misty in the mornings and, of course, a high chance of ransomware. Thank you.
Yeah, so I know a company where they actively encourage people to report if their personal accounts have been like hacked or if they've had breaches there, because it makes them think continuously about security. Like it's not just like a work thing they need to think about. It's like they should be thinking about it when they're not at work as well. And they've like gamified it all. So if they, I don't think they get points for like their accounts being hacked or whatever, but they've somehow gamified it. So it's like, so people are encouraged to kind of talk about it. And then, because if you're talking about it, you're thinking about it a lot more.
Sure.
So I think there's ways that organizations can kind of develop their culture to make people a stronger link. They're not necessarily, I mean, yeah, I guess they are the weakest link, but they're also, they shouldn't be.
Something you said though, Amy, sort of raised my hackles a little bit, because you said you think security should be doing more to inform people. And I think that's unfair, because I think security has a specific task. And I don't necessarily feel that that task is informing and educating people. I think the job of informing and educating should be assigned to somebody who is good at that, who's trained in that. I don't think it's fair to necessarily assume that somebody who can create secure systems can also explain and describe secure systems.
But so that's why I think I qualified it actually by saying the CISO is responsible for that function, because there should be someone within the security team who has that role. Like you're saying, I'm not saying like I'm not saying that like the SOC analyst should be responsible for walking around going, guys, this is what a phishing email looks like. Well, there should be someone in the team who is responsible for education, especially in large organizations.
Yeah, but having just gone through a job hunting period myself, a lot of the work, a lot of people are asking for that, exactly that. We're looking for SOC analysts and for people who will share the message around the workforce. Well, you know, I've been a teacher and I can teach and I can gladly put together a really solid educational program around security. But I wouldn't expect somebody who can do SOC analysis to be able to do that, because that's not the training they've had. And I think people need to be a bit more realistic in the way they introduce this. I know some companies, as you said, Amy, introducing gamification. I know that our own Emily Badley has got a brilliant job trying to involve augmented reality and virtual reality into security training. So there are companies who are heading in what I feel is the right direction. But I think too often you see technical people being called on to explain things to non-technical people, and surprise, surprise, it doesn't always go as smoothly as people might like.
Yes, but surely part of the role of like, so John, you must find this part of the role as pen tester. There's no point you finding a load of vulnerabilities and then not being able to explain it to a customer who's got no fucking clue what you do from a technical perspective. So you do have to have some level of being able to communicate with non-technical users, right?
Yeah, that's actually, I would argue, and this is my personal stance, every technical individual that works in this field and that wants to really get to a point of being like senior level in terms of just their technical role, be it blue team, red team, whatever, they have to learn how to translate their technical findings to non-technical people. And that includes training and awareness too. Because, for instance, if a red team does a red team engagement on a company or a client that hires them, and they find that they're able to get access to the environment because they crafted a phishing email and someone clicked the link, downloaded the PDF, executed the PDF or something like that, you're going to have to explain to that client why that worked. You have to, because you can't just say, oh, well, train your people better to not click links, because like you have to explain the kind of psychology to it in a sense, because they're paying you to do that. Now, when you talk internally, that is a little different. Yeah. When you're requiring security analysts to do security awareness training for the organization, it does detract from their technical mission, which is stopping attacks, right? You know, triaging malware, like all of that kind of stuff that is very important for a security analyst. And maybe there's a comfortable middle ground somewhere where it's not necessarily the entire job responsibility of a security analyst. Maybe it's a, you know, security and training analyst, right? Or something like that, where the job that they're signing up for is not just being a security analyst, but also doing training or focusing, maybe, you know, 75% training, 25% analyst work, or, you know, or 50-50, or also focusing on security documentation and gamifying that security awareness kind of thing. But yeah, I do see that very often, where it's the expectation of the job role, especially engineer roles, is, hey, teach everyone how to be safe and secure. And it's like, yeah, but people are dumb. People are really stupid, and you want me to teach people how to be smart. But the truth is, even security individuals will click on phishing links and payloads, because crafting them is amazingly easy in this day and age, and it's easy to phish. And if you can make a realistic template, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, someone's tired, they haven't even had their coffee, they're going through all their emails, they see this, oh shit, I gotta relog back in, I got logged out, whatever. You know, I'm screwed now, right? Like, that happens, and that's what I mean by humans will always be the weakest link. Is it doesn't matter if they're trained on how to identify like a certain like campaign or something like that, because threat actors will adapt, because that's what they do best, is adapt, and that's that cat and mouse game. I think the importance is with the back end of that, right? What happens when that PDF document is executed? Do they have the endpoint detection and response capabilities to be able to prevent this attack? Because the phishing is a great entryway to start just wreaking havoc on the environment. But it's like, okay, the important part of it is sometimes maybe you don't have enough vulnerable infrastructure because you're really actually doing a good job. You might need that kind of phishing campaign to initiate a breach kind of scenario where you have a threat actor in the environment. And the important part is what they do in the response, not so much who's going to click on it. Because I think if it's just a phishing campaign to see who's going to pass, fail, those are so fucking stupid. Like, they are stupid. It doesn't make any sense, because you're going to have employees fail. And if you're going to like try to come down on them, then you're failing your employees, because the reality is, yes, you can train them, but it doesn't matter if you train all 800 or all 10,000 of your employees. One person is going to click on that, and that's all it takes. And it depends on who that one person is.
Usually someone in the C-level, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Usually someone at C-level who has managed to get themselves to be an exception to every bit of security tooling that's been put in place, because it renders them like less productive, or it's too much of like a pain in the ass for them to have to use MFA. So they've just excluded themselves from all these policies because they can do, because they're at C-level. And then it's usually them that clicks on the fucking phishing email and then ends up being like the one person that's failed.
But it's not necessarily the clicking on the phishing email that is the issue, because actually, as you say, somebody will. When you've got a workforce of a decent size, statistically, it's going to happen. The point is, once it's happened, what does that then kick into action? Does that person then get in touch with security? Because that's the process. And is the company, because you're right, setting up your employees to fail is a great way to lose employees, because they aren't going to sit around for long to be, oh, great, it's Monday morning, what am I going to get wrong today? That's obviously not a way to build a workforce. But actually, if you are giving people real life examples that they can then work through to get their head around, that actually strengthens their knowledge and strengthens their working capability, then that does make sense. So, I was talking to CISO Anglian Water, who sent out phishing email to his entire staff, however many thousands, and he knew that people were going to click. It was obvious it was going to happen, because that's what they wanted to test. And the test they were actually doing was, how many of those people then reported it to security? How many of those people, once they realized something had gone wrong, just shut the browser and went back to what they were doing and pretended nothing happened and it was all okay? Because that's where the trouble lies. Yeah. So it's not just about trying to catch people out. It's actually trying to demonstrate what you do next and how the process needs to work. And then as a company, you can build your security defenses around that knowledge.
Well, that's the other thing. That's the other thing too, like that I think is really important, and I have to hit it before I forget it here. When it comes to like phishing, yeah, I know, right? Nice rhyme. Didn't even catch that. But when it comes to phishing, like, they don't empower bug bounty hunters to do phishing campaigns at all. Like, social engineering is out of scope damn near 98 to 100% of the time. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is that out of scope, right? I mean, it's a realistic threat vector, right? It's a realistic attack vector.
They would bankrupt themselves from paying all the bug bounties, maybe, through that?
I think there's a few reasons. One is probably being disruptive, right? You got a bunch of security researchers consistently sending phishing emails to an organization's employees. And then you have the second aspect, which is, well, payouts for something like remote code execution or access to the environment are very, very high. They're the most critical, so they don't want to go broke either. They could tailor it. They could do specific social engineering type research invite only to security researchers. They could do that, but they choose not to for the most part, from what I've seen, which is very interesting to me, very peculiar.
There's also, I think, a certain underlying fear of being accused of being unethical. That there's a feeling that if you pick on employees through social engineering, that's unethical, because you're catching people out, and why should people who are working so hard for you be attacked in this way? I'm not I'm not preaching on that side, but I'm just saying it is something, and companies are very fearful of it. They're very afraid of being attacked for being protective of their rights through what we've already said is the weakest link.
We at my last place, we used to talk to companies about doing like phishing, what they call phishing tests, and we had loads of people come back to us and be like, "Oh, well, we couldn't do that because the staff would be really unhappy about it." And I'm kind of like, "Well, I'm sure they're really unhappy when like they get phished in real life."
I'm sure they'll be really unhappy when all of their PII gets dumped from the DB, right? Like, yeah, what type of unhappy do you want? You want it now or later?
Yeah, it's like, but it was like, yeah, like law firms and stuff. Like the lawyers will like litigate against us if we start.
That's who it is.
We're trying to track
Always the lawyers.
We're trying to catch them out, and it's like, well, no. But then again, like this is what we're talking about, the phishing campaigns. If you're doing a phishing campaign to catch people out, then yeah, people are going to be pissed about it. But if you're doing a phishing campaign to educate people, then yeah, it's a different story. Maybe I've actually changed my view on phishing, like in general.
Well, it's always the lawyers. And that's the problem.
Oh yeah, lawyers and accountants between them make an awful lot of decisions that go against everything else in a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other aspect too is, we talked a lot about phishing too, but what we didn't talk about is escalation. So for instance, if I get remote code execution on a server and I start using commands on the server to see what it's connected to, like if it's a Windows server, is it domain joined? And if it is, how many hosts can I see? And the same thing with Linux, right? Like, are there IP address routes that are mapped on this Linux server? And what is it connected to? And let's say one of these servers, whichever environment it is connected to a lot within the environment. Why, as a security researcher or a hacker, right? Let's just call it what it is. As a hacker, can I not drop a C2 agent or a C2 beacon from an external tool that has a lot of capacity, or even manually pivot to other hosts to show how insecure the environment is? And that's one of the things that falls very short in bug bounty programs. They will tell you no pivoting. Same thing with vulnerability disclosure programs. They'll tell you don't establish command line access, meaning if you get remote code execution and you can prove it, do not have a persistent reverse shell or a session with that server. Why not, right? I mean, like, a lot of these companies want to mitigate risk, but they're not willing to go the full mile, right? Because they know that if you get access to the server, you start poking around, you start escalating and pivoting the different environments. Now they actually have to do their job. They have to start looking in logs to see if it's what's logged. If you end up touching customer PII or data or something like that, they might have to disclose a data breach, especially if they don't have logging and they're not sure who's impacted. And that's the sad part about this, is it's security. It's vanilla security. It's security on easy mode.
Yeah, I think. Do you think companies are quite brave when they advertise that they've got like a bug bounty program though? Because surely, like, if you've got one, then you've got to be fairly confident in your security. It's like when Tesla, it was a couple of years ago when Tesla brought out a new car and they were like, "We'll give you $1 million if you can break into this car." And I was like, "Mate, even I'm gonna go try hacking. Like, how do I learn how to hack?"
Are they brave? Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I talked about when I wrote my book, was you should always start with a private program. 100% of the time, you should start with a private program and start to expand your scope after you start to harden parts of the environment. Otherwise, you end up like John Deere. So if you look at SICKCODE's research, where it was like SICKCODE's and Wobbuffet and Dorker, myself, Rob, and everyone else that was involved in the John Deere research, we hacked the shit out of them. literally like it was a straight massacre on their systems. Like the amount of vulnerabilities that we found in such a quick turnaround, especially with exposed data and stuff like that. And then what they did is they turned to kind of please sick codes and to kind of say, hey, all right, you know what, I'll get more involved in this space. They made a HackerOne bug bounty program. The problem with that, it was public, straight up. They just made it public, and then they quickly flipped it to private. Now, here's the thing. They were already getting publicly hacked, so everyone knew they were just pretty much, open. Oh, it was like open season at this point. And then when you do that, it's kind of like, all right, well, you have like a public kind of disclosure page now, but you have a private bug bounty program. Like, what's going on here? And no one really knew what was going on. And then within the private program, they're not even paying researchers. So they tried to get sick codes to just go to join the program. They tried to trick him into joining the program, because once you join, you fall under that non-disclosure agreement for the private program, because that's how most private programs actually work. But the thing with that is most private programs pay money, and there was no money involved. So it was like, are you serious? You're going to trick me into joining a private program that doesn't pay at all? And they just didn't know what was going on or whatever. They have like a public and a private and all this stuff. They're not paying. It was a mess. And this is exactly what's wrong with just hacking in general, especially with like hacking groups, right? Because, we're not malicious. But what if we were, right? We're talking about manipulating crop data, manipulating equipment. So farmers think one zone is off limits or is in limits, and it's not, and they start destroying their own crops or something like that. I mean, there is a lot of damage that could be done from a national security type perspective, and so people need to give a shit about it, basically.
Yeah, that's quite scary, really. I think one of the things you talked about earlier was your friend Jackson, who is 15 years old. And I wanted to go back to having a quick chat about him. So obviously, well, I'm guessing he's got very limited qualifications in cyber. I don't know if he's got any qualifications in cyber. Being 15, has he even got like actual qualifications yet if he's 15?
I'm not sure if he has any certs. I don't remember. I know he was working on the OSCP, which is pretty hard to obtain.
At the age of 15, that's mental. That's
well, he's really good. He does part-time work as a pen tester, so he's like really good.
Yeah, so I just wanted to have a chat about like, I guess like experience or knowledge versus kind of like certifications and stuff, because it's being talked about a lot right now in the industry, and the fact that loads of jobs are asking for like 10 years experience and 5 MSCs, and you need to have a bachelor's degree in this and this, and you need to have an OSCP and a CRT, and you need to have and it's like you need to have a big list of fucking alphabet letters after your name, basically. But this guy's 15 and already working as a pen tester. So like, what can you tell us about him?
Sure. So traditionally speaking, they usually require, at least for a pen test role, they want you to have an OSCP. I think we're kind of getting to a point where they're starting to realize that there's value in people that might want to get certifications but don't have them, maybe money or that kind of thing. Like maybe they've done bug bounty a lot and disclose bugs, and they have write-ups and all this kind of cool stuff, but they have no certs. And I think Jackson is a really good example of what it's like to have to just get owned by someone that has no, major like certifications. He's not a CISSP holder over here just trying to, be a red teamer. He doesn't have OSCP. He doesn't have a certified red teaming operator cert or anything like that, but he could hack organizations. And I think there's a few degrees of separation. So the top tier degree of separation is an actual college degree. Requiring that from anyone that wants to be a professional hacker is idiotic. Like, I'm just going to be real with you. It makes no sense. Most of the skills are not applicable. Sure. Okay, cool. You might take some computing classes and a basic ethical hacking class, whatever the case may be for that degree. Maybe it's a cybersecurity degree, but that's not going to help you be a raw and dirty hacker. And that's just the truth.
Like, surely the industry's moving quickly enough now anyway that curriculums in universities can't keep up with kind of how fast vulnerabilities are moving, how fast technology is moving. Like, we've got AIs coming out now, and there's like people are hacking into AI systems. They're not teaching that at university because no one, like, they have to formulate a whole curriculum around it, and then the tutor has to understand it. And it's like people who are like, oh, like people hacking 5G. I know a guy that can hack 5G, but he's like the only guy I know that can do it.
And then they have, yeah, exactly. So then they have the second degree of separation, which is the certifications. Now, certifications are a lot better because they're a lot more malleable and adaptable. Like the course material will change over time and start to adapt to new tooling and that kind of stuff, depending on who the organization is. So like if it's a written exam versus if it's a hands-on exam, I think we're starting to move away from the written exams finally, which makes way more sense because written exams do nothing. Like certified ethical hacking exam, I think you answer a bunch of multiple choice questions. That's what kind of joke is that? What kind of hack do you think you're going to pull off by answering multiple choice questions? Zero. Now, then you have the opposite side of the house, offensive security certified professional, where it's like you got 24 hours to hack in the five systems, 5 boxes. And one of them is a buffer overflow. You have to do a POC for a stack-based buffer overflow. And the other 4 vary in difficulty or whatever the case may be. And that's hard. It's a hard exam, you know, and even that is, we're getting to the point where just having an OSCP, pen testing firms are like, oh, cool. Okay, but what have you done? Have you done any bug bounty? Do you have any CVEs? Have you made any tools? So it's like they're looking for more and more hands-on work, but they also want a slew of certifications. So it's pretty hard. I struggled to get into offensive security.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I always tell, like, so I head up a mentoring group. No, I head up a mentoring program of like, it's like 80 students, I think. But the thing that I kind of tell every single person is you have to make yourself stand out, because at the end of you doing the course that you're on, you'll have these qualifications, but guess who else will have the qualifications? The other fucking 80 people that you're all sat there working with right now. Like, all, like, it's like when people, I get a lot of CVs come through to me, and they're all like, I've just passed my MSc in cyber. And I'm like, great. So the other 120 people on your course, like, what else have you done that's different? Like, and it sounds
that's
like,
why Jackson rocks.
Yeah, because he's doing loads of cool stuff. Like, even now, before he's even started, he's not even, well, I guess he has started his career, but he shouldn't have done it at 15. Most people
at 18 years old, he could do whatever he wants. And that's because, just forget about certifications for a second and just think about his workflow and his process. Like this State Department, when we did the Department of State hack, he basically escalated those vulnerabilities and led that hack from start to finish. He disclosed to the media. He disclosed to Department of State. He got them to fix it. He got them to review the write-ups. He coordinated with the Department of Homeland Security. He did all that shit himself because he was like, hey, do you want to? And I was like, no, you got it, man. Run with it. Like, we've worked together enough at this point that I trust you enough to go do it. And he did. And he killed it. He did such an amazing job on that. And it's like, this kid is 15, right? So, you know, by the time he's 18, he's got a slew of CVEs, slew of breaches, media, all this stuff. What, you're going to ask him for an LSCP certifications? Are you daft?
Someone will.
I know. And that's the funny part is like, it's hilarious to me because it's still very straw in the hat. You know, 24 hours. Realistically, pen testers have much longer than 24 hours to hack into systems. They do. And threat actors have unlimited time.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So what do you want to weigh it against?
It makes me laugh that they ask for all these qualifications, because I do always think like malicious people, they can just go and be in a malicious hacking group, and they don't have to have like no one, whoever owns the hacking group, it's not like, sorry, can I see your OSCP certification before you come join us? And can I also see that you've got a cybersecurity degree? Like, they're not asking you to do that. They're like, show us the skills that you've got. We should probably take like hiring practices from the malicious like side of things and like bring those practices into how we actually hire security professionals, like based on.
There's a way to do that. There is a way to do that, and I think they can just do hands-on tests, spin up a lab environment. I've done I've applied for a company once where it was like they did a very brief kind of, one-on-one and team interview where they just asked me some questions, and then they gave me a lab and a VPN connection, and they said hack it and write up a report, and that's what I did. And I think that is an excellent way to conduct interviews, because that's the reality, right? Like, yeah, I could sound good on paper, sure, but can I hack an environment where they know there's a lot of different vulnerabilities that they'll see day to day? So yeah,
one of my friends to kind of stand out in an interview, he'd gone for an interview as I think it was a pen tester, but he wanted to kind of stand out, so he did everything that he could do kind of legally to pen test the company. So I don't know, he was looking on like Showdown and all that kind of stuff, and he ended up writing, and then he googled like what a report should look like. And then he wrote a report and took it to the company and was like, look, I'm not actually like hacked you, because I'm not allowed to do that, right? Because of the Computer Misuse Act, 1983. But I think it's 1983.
Yep.
So, but he took took a report to them and said, look, even just using like OSINT, here's what I found online, like about your organization. He ended up getting the job because they were like, shit, this guy, like, he's not hacked us, but he's told us shitloads of stuff that we didn't actually know about in terms of vulnerability. But I mean, that even just from like, a not he couldn't go that intrusive with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, like, just in general, there's a lot of issues. Everyone kind of knows the issues. Everyone complains about the same issues, and it's hard because from a legal and HR perspective and enterprise perspective, they're always going to have those kind of issues. And then you have your self-starters, people that can make a full-time living off bug bounties, because they've gamified it enough to a point where they're automating pretty much everything, and just going and taking a manual look. And then there's your threat actors, right, where they make money off of doing illegal shit. So, kind of pick your poison, pick what you're going to do, and hopefully you're not going to be a threat actor and drop ransomware on hospitals and shit, but that's kind of how it goes. That's the nature of the game. Those players are going to be around because it exists and it's a lucrative kind of thing to do. So, I think that's just how it works. And being the founder of a hacking group, a lot of people will approach me and be like, oh, how can I overhaul my enterprise security and this, that, and the other? And you can sit there and you can kind of hammer away at what they should be doing, and they will pull one little tiny subcategory of what you're saying and just use that as like a model. And I think that's part of the problem too. Like, oh, you're saying my web apps are vulnerable, and I should just, no, I'm saying that you need to focus on web apps. You need to focus on network. You need to get EDR. You need to get logging. You need to hire hackers that know what they're doing to hack you and coordinate with the devs to fix it. Like, there's so much that you need to do that unless you have a security team, you're not doing it, and you're not going to be doing it right. And APT threat actors will tell you, and I think Rob Joyce, if you know who he is, I think he's the director of the NSA right now. He said something very interesting when he did a talk about NSA TAL and his days as an APT TAL actor, right? One of the things he says is APTs are successful because they end up learning your environment better than you know your environment. And that's true. If you sit there and you map out the external network and applications and versioning of an enterprise, and you sit on that and you poke at them for weeks and weeks, you will eventually find something, whether it be a new CVE that comes out and you know that their enterprise isn't affected by it or something, and you will get in. So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how you respond and what you do. So.
Right. I think that's been an absolutely fantastic conversation, and thank you so much for joining us, John. I think we are going to wrap up now, but it'd be great if you've got any final thoughts for us before we say goodbye.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me on, for one. Number two, final thoughts. I would just say, if you are interested in starting a hacking group, then just do it. Don't wait around for someone to give you an invite. Make sure you're consistently learning something new and doing the right thing, and just trying to kind of push changes into effect, right? The CFAA, we don't want it around forever. I think we need serious changes if we want better government security and enterprise security in general, and just, we need to work together if we want security to be better and learn more hacking, really. So just get out there and just kind of make your own thing, pave your own path.
That's been amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rob, for co-hosting again.
Oh, always my pleasure, Amy.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with someone else. I don't know who yet.
It'll be nice one week if we actually know who's coming up.
It'd be great, but chaotic good is
We'll
how
get there.
everyone thinks. So there we go.
Absolutely.